Okay, everything is subjective within art, but on this video I'm going to show you my favourite 5 Procreate brushes and show you how I use them, and hopefully that will help you find new ways of using some of these brushes perhaps for yourself too. So really simply, the first brush that I use is the 6B pencil, which might seem really obvious, but within Procreate, there's just the ability on the iPad and the Apple Pencil to draw in a way that is really very much like traditional drawing. And when you get the brush size and the opacity right, and you put it to something like a kind of charcoal, so a very dark grey, you set it to somewhere appropriate to the canvas size, it really becomes so intuitive and very much like the experience of actual drawing. So you've got the accuracy and the texture and the sketch-like and the shading. So I use it for sketching organic matter, and you can really have a nice scribbled organic look that is very authentically like a pencil. When I'm doing my own kind of personal concept work and my own strange surreal sci-fi style, I always start drawing on the iPad with the 6B pencil, because you can turn the opacity quite low on it, and you're going to get something that feels much more like a HB. You can really refine it to a small fine point, or turn the opacity up and you can have jet black as well. It's really varied. It really is useful in terms of giving you the full range of kind of feels and experience that you might expect from a pencil, from dark black to a much lighter tone. And unlike some of the other brushes, I just feel that it's a bit more varied. So if you were using the HB, for example, for your sketching needs, you still have some variety in there, but on a large canvas it becomes super fine, and there's not a big difference between the smallest part of it and the largest percentage. So all the way from 1% to 100%, you can see it doesn't look dramatically different. So, and yet the 6B does give you that variation, which I think makes it much better if you like doing drawing and sketching so that it looks quite authentic and like a real pencil. So that's my number 1 brush. The next brush that I tend to use, or sets of brushes to be fair, is the Airbrushing soft brush predominantly, but I will use the little bit of the medium brush, and it's just a slightly less soft version of the soft brush. But predominantly I do tend to use the soft brush for quite a lot of different things, whether it's soft hazy effects, or even in my more personal strange work where I might do lots of sharp detail. Actually, I find just the lack of overt textures within the brush itself just a really nice way of creating smooth transitions from one detail to another. You can really turn the size of the brush down, the opacity up, and really be vivid and precise in a way, even though it is the soft brush. But then you can have it at a massive size, and you can really create nice hazy effects when you turn the opacity down. And I just think the range of the soft brush, it means that, to be honest, on a painting like this with tons of different feels and textures, this is the brush that actually I use for 99% of what you see in an image like this. So as I say again, it's really useful. You can create really nice large bands of soft colour and maybe sort of blend it together like this, and then enhance it with things like the Gaussian blur. And it's already soft the way it transitions anyway, but you can just use them in combination and then obviously start to, I'm just picking colours at random here, but you get the idea. You can really set it to low opacity and not worry that you're going to get anything majorly jarring, and you can really start to piece in effects and textures by hand rather than on a kind of stamp. Okay, sometimes it might look a bit overtly soft focus when you zoom in, but then all you need to do is just reduce the size and just start to work into those details a little bit more closely when you feel it's appropriate to. So yeah, the soft brush within airbrushing, I find it a hugely versatile brush, from creating transition colours in the background to even using it for the most fine-grained detail and textures within a super detailed image as well. My third brush is within organic, and it's the Rainforest brush. Now, although it's titled Rainforest, and you definitely can use it for a texture to replicate the kind of treetops within a large kind of forest area. Maybe you're doing a landscape with a mountain side and you want to create some tree textures on it. You might pick a dark colour, and then you might pick more of a green colour, and you could start creating layers of texture that certainly from, if you zoom out and you're looking from a distance, it can give you the impact of tree tops. type texture within a rainforest. And you just build this up, obviously, with different kind of greens and layer it up. But it is really effective for what it says as a rainforest brush. But another aspect of it is that you can use it as a really useful clouds brush. So I'll create a new layer for that, go to an appropriate color, and it's just a really nice way of starting to build in textures, and perhaps it's a little bit too refined and detailed, but you can change the size and it just gets you to the kind of cloud textures that are really useful really quickly. And I've started to use this brush in my cloud textures. I used to use the airbrushing and just show people how I would do that more manually, and it's more labor intensive, and yes, it does take longer using the airbrush, but you can just quite quickly start to build in the appropriate kinds of textures using something like the rainforest brush. And it's a little bit sharp, and what you can do is just simply soften it, go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and just nudge it a couple of % in, and it just takes the edge off that texture, and when you zoom in it just has a slightly softer appearance and it works a bit better. And I just find it a super useful brush to bring out the right kind of shapes without a lot of really thought about them. It just very simply lays out some of the things that will actually work pretty well. And if you struggle with those kind of textures and just how to create a slight sense of random breakaway points around the edges of things, then something like this texture is, or this brush rather, is really quite useful in getting you at least part of the way there. And then you can switch back, for example, to the airbrush, the soft brush, and just sort of alternate between them and just pick out the edges now, because actually, you know, you didn't create the bumps yourself necessarily, but it can inspire you. It can give you a starting point, a kickoff point, and then you can use that to then just build in a little more precision as and where you feel appropriate. And it just helps you get to a point that, you know, gives you a bit more confidence to really go for it. And this painting is an example of where I used the rainforest brush as a starting point for some of the cloud details, and yeah, it just helped speed up the process a little bit. The next brush I really enjoy using, and it's within the artistic brushes, and it's the Leatherwood brush. I find it a really versatile brush, and I found lots of different ways that I've ended up using it. So in this example, I have used it for the water section here. Now when it comes to using this brush, there's a couple of things that I prefer to do just to amend it slightly. Now I go to the grain and the scale, and just to soften it to get rid of the actual grain that's there, because if you look carefully, and I'll make it bigger so you can see it, it has a kind of canvas grain that's within it, and it doesn't necessarily suit if you're using things like the soft brush. So I turn the scale of that to 0 or as close to that, put it on none, and then I tend to play around with the stroke path too and add space in between it. So I would put it up to something like 40% in the image I've shown you, and if I just go back onto it now, in fact I'll go back onto the visualization of it there, you can see that it's quite spaced out compared to what it was. And now you can pick your size and your opacity. I'll show you in this section with the white, and this is the kind of grain that it creates, which is really useful actually for the kind of textures that you would see in water. And obviously you need to select the right colors, but I found it really useful to create the slight suggestion that the water is creating lots of ripples and lots of breaks of texture, and the light is impacting it in different ways. So you can, you know, really reduce it in scale or things in the distance, and then turn it up in scale when you get into something much closer to you. And I've exaggerated it there, obviously they are too much, but it's really useful for that. And it's also really useful because it's a very much directional brush. So if you're going side to side, then each element of that brush goes left to right too. But as soon as you use the brush up and down, then the entire brush texture, each element of it, so this section of it has more of an oval that points upwards compared to being on its side. So it is responsive to the direction that you're actually using it to, which is really useful. So for example, I've used it there in the water, but I might also use it for creating kind of an upward movement of texture within something on a ground level. But what's also really good about it is that you can use it to create kind of tree textures. So if you put it back to normal, go onto it, slide and reset it, reset, and they do clump together again more. I still recommend that you'd press on it and you'd go to the grain and just turn the scale of the grain to none. But then you can use it, and I'll match the colors that are there just to show you, so I'll probably need to select it. And you can just start to create clumps of texture like this, and with a few taps and you know, not necessarily up or sideways, but with a more of a circular kind of gestures, a change, more erratic kind of look, you can create sections of foliage really quite naturally, because it has lots of little points within it, and it's a really quick and useful way to create something that replicates foliage and tree textures, and you just get loads of different elements of texture within that without any effort really whatsoever. Even then, I do tend to soft focus it in a little bit, so if you look at it close up, it has a strange element to it that simply when you go to the Gaussian blur and just blur it in a touch, it reduces that noise and just gives it a slightly more natural look. And I've used the Leatherwood brush for loads of my tutorials so far, and it's just one that I just keep going back to. So the last brush that I'm going to talk about is within the inking, and it's the syrup brush. Now there are other brushes that do some similar things, but this is the one I prefer the most. So it's really quite varied. It goes up to a massive variety of different sizes, so from 100 down to 1%, it's two completely different feeling brushes, as you can see. So you could use it, for example, at a smaller size. Lower down, you could use it for finer details like eyelashes. You can probably see how that would work. And at a larger size, maybe not that much larger, you could use it for grass in a landscape, blades of grass that just overlap each other perhaps. And it naturally tapers off on the end, and it has a kind of stabilization that means it doesn't wobble too much. You know, if you go slowly, you can introduce those wobbles, but it's very easy just to create a nice natural curve with it. And I just find it a really useful brush to use for a variety of different things. So for example, I've used it in the foreground grass in a landscape like this. And here's another example of where I've used that brush. And another benefit of it is that it's really pressure sensitive, so you can press on and get a larger shape and then really bring it down, and just a variety of different shapes. So if whether it's a grass that has a larger bit on the end and then tapers off to nothing, you can really control it a lot with the pressure, which is really useful too. So yeah, another brush that I really love using in my tutorials and my paintings. So these are just 5 brushes within all the brushes that Procreate actually offer. Within each of these sections, there's tons of different brushes, and you may have other ones that are really useful to you. I know that I've used some of the others, and for example, things like the rad brush, I've experimented with using that for kind of leaves on the ground and then combining that with a Gaussian blur just to soften them in a little bit. Sometimes that can be quite useful. And yeah, you know, I could talk about lots of the different brushes and how I might use them, but those are the 5 that I keep returning to within not only my tutorials, but whenever I'm approaching other commission work and things like that too. I hope it's been a useful demonstration and discussion about it. If there are other brushes that you think are brilliant and you get a lot of use out of, then please let me know what those are in the comments. Please check out my other tutorials. I do tons of landscape tutorials especially. Give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe, and don't forget the bell notification to make sure that you do get notified of all these future videos. Thanks for watching. I shall catch you back here soon with another tutorial. Bye for now.